Okay, so the main component of the central controls for our character is going to be the spine and all of the controls that relate to the spine. So let's jump over to the whiteboard and discuss the kinds of functionality we're going to create with those controls and how those controls are intended to work. So I'm going to jump over to the whiteboard. And just like in Character Rigging 1, all of the controls that we design on our character rig, they're really going to be defined by the requirements of the animator and the requirements of the animation. Now, in this case, we're going to speculate again, like in Character Rigging 1, that we want easy, usable controls. We're also going to speculate that we want to have the ability to create both a stretchy rig to set up our goblin and to lock that stretchiness so that we can set up a more anatomically correct skeleton. So we're going to use the rig for both the goblin and the skeleton. So for that, we're going to design a spine control system that gives flexibility and it gives powerful control whilst leaving the animator with easy, usable controls. So let's take a look at our spine, and our spine is going to consist of a number of bones running up the spine. So we're going to have a number of bones which run up the spine. And those bones can be set up to work with our stretchy IK, and that means they're going to have a curve and they're following the curve, and we're going to set up some control objects along them. We want to basically have that bone chain be modified by 5 controls. The first control is going to be our hip control. So we're going to have our hips control. The next control is going to be a shoulder control at the very top of our character, and you had to excuse that going off the top of the whiteboard there, but if you imagine that circular control being almost identical to our hip control, only at the top of the spine for our character, and in between those are going to be 3 spine controls which are going to be offset towards the back of the character, and they're going to act very similarly to those stretchy spline controls that get created on our curve. They're going to modify CV locations on our curve. So we're going to have the ability to move our hips. When we move our hips, we're going to be moving the spine. Now we have the choice as to whether moving the hips will move our shoulders or whether moving the hips is going to be detached from the shoulders. What we're actually going to do is set up 2 shoulder controls, one that's attached to the hips, one that's detached from the hips. We're going to give the ability to blend between these, and of course, because it's essential, we're going to give the animator the ability to match one of those controls to the other or vice versa, and we'll talk about that when we come up to generating our shoulder controls. We're also going to have our spine controls, these 3 controls, linearly interpolate between the hip location and the shoulder location. That means if we were to have our hips and shoulders very close together, something like so, our 3 controls would be very close together. If we were to stretch those out, our 3 controls would space out. If we were to move, say, our hips forward and our detached shoulders back, our 3 controls would linearly interpolate between those. That means that as we start repositioning the shoulders or as we start repositioning the hips, we need to do very little work in order to maintain a good looking spine. We can still come in and grab each of these controls in turn and manipulate their positions from that linearly interpolated point, but they are going to linearly interpolate in order to maintain as close to what the spine was before with the new positioning of the spine. Also, it's worth noting we're going to be applying a twist to our spine bones. If we were to rotate our shoulder control around, we'd obviously want the bones at the top to follow that rotation perfectly, but the bones at the bottom to still follow the rotation of the hip control. So we're going to have a twisting that goes around our spine. So that's going to be something a little bit different to the spine that we actually developed back in the technical rigging series, or the spline rather that we developed back in the technical rigging series, because this stretchy spline is going to have a twist applied to it. And when we twist, we want our controls for the spline to also linearly interpolate that twist, moving around our spine, something like so, if we were to twist our shoulder control. So we've got a lot of functionality that we want to create. There's actually a lot of power, even though just a few controls are being used to control our spine. The heart of this system is going to be that shoulder control that can be attached and can be detached. From there, of course, we're going to have those linearly interpolated controls for affecting our spine as well. So with that, that is going to conclude the overview of our spine setup, and in the next video we can go ahead and actually start the implementation of our spine setup. Thanks a lot, everyone.